Good afternoon and welcome to another episode of This Week in Plymouth. I am your host and your town manager, Derek Brindisi. Today we have two individuals joining us to talk about climate action and adaptation and the plan that goes along with it, correct?
Correct.
So Mike Cahill, our climate resiliency planner, and Dan Mullen, one of our members of our CANZ committee, are here with us this afternoon to talk about all the things that have gone into the planning aspect of the climate action plan. But then we'll talk at the end about Climate Action Week that's coming up next week. So Dan, let's start with you first. Can you just, so the folks are aware of your background, how you got involved with CANZ and some of the work that you're doing with the CANZ committee?
For sure. So I've been working on climate energy for about 20 years in the private sector and also the nonprofit sector. In kind of a wide variety of roles related to public policy, program development and program management, fundraising and business development, marketing and communications. My main skill set is really around like writing and editing and content development. And so that's typically what I offer to clients. I'm a self-employed consultant. One of the really interesting things about working in this space is that it's really dynamic and fast-paced. And so everyone is trying to figure out what new developments mean for them, what it means for their products and services or their research, or what effective public policy would look like, that kind of thing. So that's typically what I work with clients on and help them figure that out and communicate effectively about it. And there's actually parallels between that and the work that I'm doing with CANZ. So CANZ, I got interested in CANZ because I'm actually from here. Plymouth's my hometown. I moved here with my mom when I was in elementary school. And I moved away for a million years. I only lived in cities for like the last 25 years, but I moved back late last year and started looking around for different volunteer opportunities, and I found CANZ pretty quickly. And it felt like a good fit, and I just started showing up. We just came to meetings starting in January. And so I've been involved since then. And with an issue like climate change, part of the response is, it's a massive problem and it's going to take big picture systemic change.
Sure.
It's also going to take local action. And I'm really excited to be part of the team that's figuring out what an effective response for Plymouth would be and actually implementing that. So Mike will go into this in a minute, the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. I started getting involved earlier this year just as it was getting finalized. And so, as I said, it's kind of a blueprint for the town's response. And it organizes actions into 5 different groups, and one of those is transportation. Transportation is actually responsible for nearly half of the town's climate emissions. So that transportation working group is the one that I'm helping to facilitate.
Great. Yeah, that's very helpful. And again, we'll talk about the Climate Action Plan in a few minutes. But Michael, you've been working for the town for quite a number of years now, starting on, I think, as a natural resource officer, and then last year taking on the role as the Climate Resiliency Planner, right, under the new Department of Energy and the Environment, which I think I've learned from Mike over the last few months that although I thought this was unique to what Plymouth was doing, it seems like there's a lot of other cities and towns that are doing similar work. And so we got some work to do. We got some catch up to do compared to some of the other Massachusetts cities. But Mike, can you just tell the folks your role specifically in the Department of Energy and the Environment and the things that you've been doing over the past year?
Sure. So my name is Mike Cahill. I'm the Climate Resiliency and Sustainability Planner for the Town of Plymouth. I've been in this role for about 9 months at this point. Previously, I'd worked under formerly the Department of Marine and Environmental Affairs for 8 years, where I was a natural resources specialist, really working on the natural resources side. I have an undergraduate degree in environmental science, a master's degree in public policy with a focus of environmental policy and ecological economics. Climate change is, like Dan mentioned, is a very multifaceted, very complex problem. So really, climate change touches every aspect of town government. Really, my role in its simplest form is working to prevent or to limit the risks and the adverse effects of climate change for our community members and capitalize on the opportunities afforded to us as we transition to a more resilient community.
And the CANZ committee, and we keep using the term CANZ, so just so folks are aware, it's the Climate Action Net Zero Committee.
Correct.
Right? Just, Dan, Mike, can you kind of explain what that means, Climate Action Net Zero? Because there's a meaning behind that.
Sure. Yeah, so the CANZ committee was originally created back in 2001 by the Select Board when the Select Board declared a climate emergency. There were many dedicated community members like Dan and other members of the CANZ committee that fought for that to happen. And really what the charge of the CANZ committee was at the time was to do a emissions survey to figure out where our emissions are, really do a baseline assessment to figure out where we should be prioritizing, and create a climate action adaptation plan. Those are the real two charges of the CANZ committee, and they've done a fantastic job doing that so far.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things. So you've said it, and Dan has said it already. So we keep mentioning this thing called the Climate Action Adaptation Plan, which I know, Mike, you just presented to the Select Board this past May. The Select Board approved it. Can you explain to the folks at home what this Climate Action Plan is, what it's all about? Dan mentioned it's got like 5 domains, so just kind of give folks a 40,000 foot level view of what it really is.
Sure. So this process started back in April of 2003. We contracted a group called KLA Associates, Kim Lundgren Associates. We selected them for their successful track record in the past. They've created climate action plans for 43 communities, cities and municipalities across the country. It was a 1.5 year long process to get to that point. And really, typically when people think of climate change, they really focus on the risks. We wanted to highlight the opportunities, both economic and social, for the town in doing so. So we developed the Climate Action Plan, which has 62 priority actions within it. And there are 5 main areas of focus: buildings, energy and infrastructure, transportation, like Dan had mentioned, natural systems, health, safety and preparedness, and waste. So it's a very all-encompassing plan that really touches every aspect of town government.
And I know, because I had participated in some of more of the steering committee conversations, the group really engaged individuals across the spectrum of the community. Can you describe some of the folks that participated in this? Because what is really important, and we'll talk about the master planning process later and some of the goal setting the Select Board have done over the past 3 years. But I think what's really important is that folks at home realize that this plan wasn't created in a vacuum. Some people don't believe in climate change, right? So we probably won't cover that topic today, but they don't believe in it. And so can you describe the individuals you engage and how you were able to gain community feedback and that inform this decision making?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we were developing the plan, we prioritized a whole of government approach. We wanted to have a collaborative governance when coming up with the priority actions that we should be focusing on. So those 62 actions were identified at advisory group meetings, in which we engaged with 43 members of local governments, town leaders, and direct stakeholders to ensure that we were encapsulating all the problems and really looking at the entire picture when we were coming up with solutions.
Okay. And Dan, over to you. What do you think is some of the biggest benefits by the town now having a climate action plan?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned like people, they may or may not believe in it or whatever. I mean, my sense is maybe sub out the word future, like it's a plan for the future. And I think it stands to benefit the town. But first of all, I think it's a critical step in helping Plymouth prepare. We've seen some impacts already. Those are expected to get worse. So this will allow us to kind of formulate a response and protect our infrastructure, protect our economy, protect our citizens. I think there's also tremendous value in just having a plan. With climate change or any complicated issue, no one has all the answers. And so it's really about having good questions, knowing the right questions to ask and having a good framework to consider them in, so you can come up with a response. And that's what the Climate Action Adaptation Plan offers to the town. I think it's also a really good look for the town. Mike had mentioned collaborative governance and a whole of government approach and whatever. For me, it's a good example of responsive government. I think 2019 was the year that Plymouth declared a climate emergency. And I think it did that because there was a group of concerned citizens and they worked with town leaders and they got that declared. And as Mike mentioned, there was a flurry of activity, including now the CANZ committee and this climate action adaptation plan that came out of that. I also just think it's a really good look for the town, for state government. Massachusetts has a long history of thoughtful environmental and energy policy making,
Right.
And to have a plan like this in place really positions us well, I think, for not only state but also federal funding to build the kind of community that we want.
Well, you certainly see. at the federal level and at the state level, and I've been working in local government for 24 years, and you can watch, if you follow the funds, right, you can see where the policies are going. So I remember in 2008, there was a lot of money coming out of the federal and state level to try to reduce opioid overdoses, right? And so, and now in the last 4 or 5 years, you're seeing more and more money, probably even longer than that, more and more money going back towards green infrastructure. And so clearly there's been a concerted effort at the federal level and the state level because they're putting resources behind these policies.
Yeah.
Are there any policies that you are tracking at the state level that are driving some of your decision making with the CANZ committee, or conversations you're having at the CANZ level that you're watching the new administration at the governor's level pass that we should be mindful of moving forward?
Yeah, so I think one that's very interesting is the Mass Leads Act that was put in place by the Healy administration, and it allocates a significant amount of funding towards clean technology development in Massachusetts. So a lot of what we talk about when we talk about the Climate Action Plan is the social and the economic benefits associated with it. I always say in 2024, climate change is far beyond science. There's a whole economic benefit that we're really looking at. So part of the plan within the natural systems sector is focusing on blue economy development and climate resilient technologies that we're looking to develop here in town. That Mass Leads Act that was put in place by the Healy administration will help allocate some of that funding towards developing that technology here in Massachusetts.
And so I guess this is more a question for like a lay person, right? So, we talk a lot about climate action and climate change, I should say, but I don't think the common individual understands really what that means. I mean, they watch stuff on CNN but what does that really mean? And the reason I bring this up is because we had a conference call yesterday with the Commissioner of Public Health at the state level around the issues around mosquitoes, right? Biting mosquitoes, Triple E, West Nile virus, things of that nature. And she often spoke about the reason we're in this high risk, critical risk status here in this community is because of climate change. I mean, she referenced it multiple times. It's because of climate change. So what can we talk about, just to kind of let folks understand that there is a shift in the climate, and because I think if people understand that, they'll appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yeah.
Sure.
You go first.
So really, when you're thinking about climate change, you're talking about increase in atmospheric temperatures that are changing to dramatic shifts in natural systems. That's globally. Currently, we have the tools to reverse some of the atmospheric warming temperatures and revert back to preserving some of those natural systems.
So that's possible
globally. Correct. The technology is in place. It's just putting these policies in place and putting actions and plans like we have here on the local level in place to start combating climate change. But there's always hope. I never try to do doom and gloom. I always try to be positive. In going through with actions like the ones that we have identified, will put us on track to begin doing that.
Sure. But again, Plymouth is one small microcosm, right, of a much larger national, and I would say even international movement, right? So, this is all hands on deck type of movement if we're going to change. I remember back in the 80s as a kid growing up, the only thing they talked about really was the ozone layer and the deterioration of the ozone layer. And I think that conversation moved into the conversations we're having today. So anything to add to what Mike said?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was actually a pretty easy one to solve because that was kind of a specific pollutant, and it was able to get that under control very quickly. This is tricky because it relates to the combustion of fossil fuels and the emission of carbon emissions, right? So and that's ubiquitous. It's like the backbone of the global economy. And there's a lot of power in incumbent industry that has delayed action for a long time. But, you're right, and I mentioned this in my opening comments, it's a global issue, it requires systemic change. It also really does require local action, especially by the people who care the most about it. It's important that if people are feeling anxiety around the climate, that they're actually able to take action in ways that they think will matter. I think, I came back here, part of the reason I moved back here was because I visited during the pandemic. I was here in fall 2020 because I wanted to be close to family. And it was it was gorgeous, but it was much, much, much warmer than when I was a kid, right? I moved here in the mid 80s. And so fall now is a whole different ball game. So that's one thing that people can see in their real, like it's, it extends. And so I suspect, to bring it back to your question about mosquitoes and stuff like that, it's a warmer period here and for longer, right? Like I said, 2019, I think, was the year that the climate emergency was declared. And that, I think, was in response, you were here, I wasn't, but that was in response to really strong storms. And I know that my mom lives near the lobster pound in Manamet, and I think that cliff just got battered, right? And there was a whole bunch of work, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's, and again, regardless of what your beliefs are, unfortunately, this is a conversation that's gotten politicized for a really long time.
Sure, yeah.
But regardless of your beliefs, I mean, this is your town. So like, what do you want to see happen to protect it? Like, not if you're not an outdoorsy person or whatever, that's fine. It's really about the infrastructure in your town. It's about, the people who are most vulnerable to extreme heat are the elderly, right?
Right.
And, if our roads wash out or whatever due to an extreme storm, we'll all feel that. So, and thanks to the work of Mike and others, and thanks to some of the priorities set out in this plan. And also there was another municipal vulnerability preparedness study, right, in 2020. So that, I think, looked at the town, again, before my time, but mapped out specifically, like, what do we need to worry about to think about the coming decades? So I really think that's the value, and it's the value of having a plan like this. And it, everyone stands to benefit regardless of, what their political affiliation is or whatever.
If I could just piggyback off of one of Dan's points there. Sure. So Dan said he moved back in 2020 because...
No, 2023, like 11 months ago.
2023, excuse me.
Yeah.
So during 2020, during COVID pandemic, Plymouth had more new entrants and more new residents moving in than any other community in the Commonwealth. And a lot of that was attributed to our abundance of natural resources and natural beauty here. We have 37 miles of coastline, which makes Plymouth very unique. There's a tremendous ability and accessibility to coastal resources. So a lot of those new entrants, they were coming here for what we have and what we have, what we can preserve. The Climate Action Plan goes forth, and we're looking to safeguard a lot of those features that make Plymouth so unique and such a special place where people want to come and live.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a really great point, Mike, because I can tell you as a kid growing up in the city, we didn't have access, certainly didn't have access to the ocean, but we didn't have access to the hiking trails that Plymouth has to offer, or the 360 ponds that Plymouth has to offer. So, if you enjoy the outdoors, and I think most people do, Plymouth is a place, certainly a desirable place to raise a family, to come to work every day, which is why I couldn't wait to come back to Plymouth, after I left for that short period of time. So you're right. In the Climate Action Plan, I think the hope is that it does preserve those natural resources for generations to come. I'm going to ask you guys both a question, but I'm going to go to the end, but I'm going to give you a heads up on it. If we can give some advice to the folks at home, they could do one thing, right? That'll help us all in this effort to reverse, climate change. What would it be? Don't answer it now. Just think about it, because we got about 10 minutes before we go back to that. But I will ask you that question at the end. But the Climate Action Plan in and of itself, again, sets a roadmap of where we need to go. And I know, Mike, and I know, Dan, you guys have already been working on some projects. Can you describe some of the projects that you're actively working on so folks at home understand what's going on?
Sure. Yeah. So we can talk about 3 quick actions out of the 62. Unfortunately, we don't have time to talk about all 62 today.
Okay.
But the first one that I'll mention is the Jenny Gristmill Nature Lake Fishway Bypass. The project has 3 components. It's the dredging of Jenny Pond, repairs to the Jenny Pond Dam, and the creation of a Nature Lake Fishway Bypass, which will circumvent the dam. That site is a little bit unique because it is the oldest, one of the oldest, if not the single oldest dam in the country, dating back to 1636. So pretty significant. So for that reason, we're not electing to remove the dam like we have on other dams along Town Brook. Really what we're looking to do is remove the sediment that's accumulated in the pond upstream, make repairs to that dam. There are 43 properties immediately downstream, and it is a significant hazard dam. So if it were to fail, those properties would be inundated with water. And additionally, we're expecting to see significantly more rainfall over the next 50 years or so associated with climate change. By installing a Nature Lake Fishway Bypass will not only able to improve habitat and fish passage, but we'll also be able to allow additional flow volume to go downstream in heavy rainfall events.
So especially the Plymouth residents, I think most folks, know exactly the area you're talking about over the Jenny Grist Mill. And so that, I believe, was a $10 million NOAA grant, right? It was part of that project. I think overall it's like a $15 million project.
Correct.
$10 million are being funded by the feds. That goes back to my point earlier that, just watch the federal funding, watch where it's flowing. And clearly it's, there's a lot of money that's being directed towards these types of efforts. But the other thing you mentioned on that project specifically is the Fishway. So right now, in order for what kind of
River
fish?
herring.
Herring to make their way upstream, they have to go up the fish ladder, right? And this is going to be a bypass that allows them to avoid the fish ladder, right? And
Correct.
go around.
Correct. Yeah, so the issue with that ladder, it does pass fish, but the issue is that it is only about a 2-foot wide entrance. Lower down on the channel, it's about 25 feet. So think of it as a big traffic jam. There's fish that queue up below that dam, about 75,000 at peak migration periods. So this will allow additional fish to get upstream, spawn, which is extremely beneficial for fish that are of recreational and commercial concern. I'm talking about cod, haddock, striped bass,
Wow.
everything that really eats river herring.
And that project, I believe, will begin this fall.
Correct. Yes, we'll begin the dredging hopefully in November.
So that's project one. You said you're 3.
Yep, so we'll do the Downtown Resiliency Project next, and that's reimagining 3,000 linear feet in the downtown area, running from Main Street Extension to Samoset Street. Really, that project has a whole host of benefits, but the ones that are climate-focused are urban heat island mitigation and stormwater runoff. Additionally, there will be significant pedestrian safety improvements, and there will be enhancing the economic vitality of the downtown area. What we're looking to do is incorporate nature-based solutions, so plantings of trees and vegetation to limit heat in that area, collect stormwater before it enters the ocean and treat it before it enters the ocean, and improve mobility through that area, reducing the need for vehicles.
And that project, I know you just went in front of the select board, presented the conceptual idea on that, and it seemed like they definitely gave you the green light to continue to move forward. Now you're headed to the design phase?
Correct. So we are in the design phase. We just were able to announce that we got MVP funding from the state government, and we got $360,000, which will be used to bring us to final design. We're anticipating that we will be at final design around July of 2025.
Great. Number 3.
And number 3 is a solar development project that we're working on. And this is an RFP that we just closed a couple weeks ago, but it's evaluating installation of solar arrays at 5 locations across town. All locations house critical town infrastructure. Those include Plymouth North High School, Plymouth South High School, DPW headquarters, Cedarville landfill, and the Plymouth Library. The goal is to provide power to those facilities. In the case of critical infrastructure failure, those buildings will still be able to provide services to residents, and town operations can proceed at that critical infrastructure.
Yeah, that's an interesting project because throughout Massachusetts and probably throughout the nation, capped landfills have been used as solar array fields. And it's interesting that Plymouth has 2 capped landfills and no solar array fields. However, we've clear cut acres and acres of land to create solar array fields, and we have an area that's already been, in my opinion, destroyed that is really prime for solar array fields. So again, that's a great project, and thank you to David Gould, the director, and yourself for that leadership. So we have about a few more minutes left, but Dan, how can folks at home get more involved in the working groups? I mean,
Sure.
I hope folks are interested in this work and they want to join.
Yeah, absolutely. So one way you can email us, I think the email address is priorityplymouth@gmail.com. So you can reach us that way. You can do what I did. You can just show up to a meeting. So our next one is, I think, Wednesday, October 9th, something like that. Okay. And so you can come, they take place in Town Hall, or you can do it over Zoom. And then the CANZ, Climate Action Net Zero Committee webpage on the town's website always has information about what we're up to and what the upcoming opportunities are. So lots of ways to get involved.
That's great. So 2 more quick questions. Climate Action Week is coming up next week. Mike, what should folks know about Climate Action Week?
Yeah, so Climate Action Week is running from the 22nd to the 29th, and that is National Climate Week. To piggyback off National Climate Week, CANZ and myself, the Department of Energy and Environment, we are going to be offering information and ways to engage with the community around the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. There are 4 main events that we're going to be focusing on. On September 21st, we have the Recycling and Sustainability Fair located at Plymouth North High School. On the 23rd, we have an upstream carbon event at Wildlands Trust, looking at ways to utilize data for land prioritization. On September 28th, we have the Health and Wellness Fair at the Plymouth Library, and the Health, Safety, and Preparedness Working Group will be there to share information on the Climate Action Plan. And then finally, on September 30th, I'll be presenting information on the Climate Action Adaptation Plan to Sustainable Plymouth at their quarterly meeting.
And so all of that information, because that's a lot you just mentioned, can all be found on the town's website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. Go to the website. You'll find all that information for Climate Action Week, correct?
Correct. And it will be also out on the town's social media platforms as well.
All right. So that's very helpful. So back to my question 10 minutes ago. We only have 2 minutes, so maybe Dan, you can answer this question.
I'm going first because
All right.
Mike will have to think of his
go
speed. Okay. So the group that I facilitate is transportation, but the part of the energy transition that I'm actually more familiar with is has to do with electricity, power sector. So the one action that I would recommend for everyone, this doesn't work if you're in a condo, unfortunately, but so I'll also lay the groundwork here. So we live in a state that puts aside a lot of resources to help people save energy. Anyway, get your home retrofitted, like do a deep energy efficiency retrofit, put solar panels on your roof if you can do that. That would be the number one thing. And so there's always lots of incentives out there. Contact your utility, figure out what your options are. And there are people whose job it is, consultants that will help you figure it out and do the math for you and stuff like that. And typically what happens is the efficiency savings, tend to subsidize everything else and pay for the whole project over a short period of time.
And I know Mass Save they've been running that program for many, many years.
That's right.
So it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Do you have anything, Mike?
So great minds think alike. I was thinking the exact same thing.
That's why I went first.
And what I'll mention too is that part of the Climate Action Plan is an energy coaching program.
Okay.
So when new residents come to town, or if they want to retrofit their homes, they can come into the Department of Energy and Environment, and we can provide you with information on specifically how to do that, resources that are in place, what type of equipment that you should be utilizing, and some contractors in the area that are doing this type of work. So hopefully in the next few months, we'll be able to have that information together. Additionally, I'll note as well, Eversource has a new communications person that just started within the last few months, and they have rebates for qualified residents here in Plymouth. If you'd like to reach out to me, I'm more than happy to share that information with any residents that are looking to capitalize on some of those rebates for energy efficiency.
So that's all great advice to those folks at home that maybe can't participate necessarily in the CANZ committee, but there are things that they can do to help us reverse climate change.
Absolutely.
Right. So Dan, thank you for coming. Mike, thank you for coming. This was very helpful. I'm sure we'll have you back in 6 months and we can talk about all the great progress we made over time. So thank you everybody for joining us at home. Again, as I mentioned earlier, please go to our website at www.plymouth-ma.gov. You can see this episode on that website. You can also find more information and resources as we described here this afternoon. So thank you very much and see you again.